Surprising details behind the $2,000 fourth stimulus check. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shuba Espanol TV, your go-to channel for important updates on finances, government policies, and everything that directly impacts your pocket. In today's video, we're diving deep into the upcoming $2,000 fourth stimulus check and its potential impact on millions of low-income and fixed-income beneficiaries. From Social Security retirement, SSDI, SSI, VA, and RRB recipients to survivors, if you're in any of these categories, this video is especially for you. I have all the details and crucial insights you need to be aware of, so let's jump right in. The situation in 2025, a year of major changes as we move further into 2025, it's safe to say that this year has been one for the books. Things have been shifting dramatically in the world of government spending, policymaking, and even fiscal responsibility. I'm sure most of you have noticed the growing interest in the DOGE initiative and how it's affecting our economy. Whether we're talking about changes in federal agencies, layoffs, contract cancellations, or the complex measures being taken to reallocate funds, it's clear that a lot is happening in Washington, and it's going to get even more interesting as we progress throughout the year. For those of you who've been following the channel for a while, you know we've discussed DOGE before, specifically in relation to its mission to scrape together as many federal dollars as possible by cutting unnecessary government spending. They've been hard at work, pulling in billions from agencies and rethinking existing contracts, and they've only just started. In fact, it's been about 6 weeks since they've really started getting into this strategy, and so far, the results are already adding up. But the big question is, what are they going to do with all that money? And could some of it actually be used for direct relief to the American public, especially for low-income individuals? Breaking down the $2,000 stimulus check now, let's talk about the $2,000 fourth stimulus check. You might be wondering, is this really going to happen? Well, let's break down what it would actually mean, especially for those living on fixed incomes like Social Security recipients, people on disability, and veterans who rely on monthly benefits. For those of you who need additional financial support, this is crucial information to follow. You may remember the previous rounds of stimulus checks from 2020 and 2021. These payments were sent out as a response to the pandemic, and while they provided much-needed relief, they were far from perfect. Over the course of those 2 years, 3 major rounds of stimulus payments were made, reaching around 85% of the population. The goal was to help people weather the economic storm, but the results weren't without their consequences. The rush of federal money into the economy contributed to inflation, supply chain issues, and ultimately led to price hikes on essentials like food, gas, and housing. The idea was to stimulate the economy, but instead, it created a scenario where too much money was chasing too few goods. As a result, prices shot up, and inflation became a pressing concern for everyone. The government's efforts to save DOGE's $2 trillion goal fast forward to 2025, and the government is looking to remedy some of these previous issues by focusing on efficiency, eliminating waste, and saving money where it can. Enter DOGE, a government efficiency initiative aimed at scrapping together as much federal savings as possible through a series of measures. Their goal is to save $2 trillion over the course of about a year and a half, from January 2025 until mid-2026. This ambitious plan is gaining momentum, and it raises the question of what will happen to this newfound savings. Could some of this money be used for direct payments, like a $2,000 stimulus check? As a reference point, the previous rounds of stimulus payments during the pandemic cost the government about $850 billion in total. But in this case, if DOGE manages to gather $2 trillion, the $200 billion needed to send out a $2,000 check to low-income and fixed-income beneficiaries would be just a small fraction of that, around 10% of the total amount saved. The real question is, how much will go directly to the people who need it most? The cost of sending $2,000 checks to low-income Americans. Let's dive into the numbers to get a clearer picture. In the United States, roughly 40 million people are living in poverty. At the same time, 72.5 million people are receiving benefits from Social Security. Now, not all of these individuals would qualify for a $2,000 stimulus check, but let's take a conservative estimate and say that around 50 million people who are either living in poverty or on fixed incomes would benefit from such a payment. That's approximately 30% of the population. So, what would it cost to send out $2,000 checks to these 50 million people? Simple math tells us that this would amount to $100 billion in direct payments. But here's the important point: DOGE is already on track to save up that much, if not more. With $200 billion being the amount needed to send checks to 100 million people, the savings they are accumulating could easily cover this cost, even if we assume that $2 trillion is saved over the next year and a half, and even if we assume that we would be distributing $2,000 checks to 100 million low-income or fixed-income individuals, the total cost would only represent a small fraction of those savings, about 10% at best. This makes the $2,000 stimulus check a relatively feasible option, and with $2 trillion in savings, it's well within reach. Impact on the economy and inflation. Now, you might be wondering, what about the inflation concerns? Many of you remember the inflationary pressures caused by the previous rounds of stimulus checks. So, what's different this time? Here's the key difference: the $2,000 checks we're talking about today would not involve printing fresh money. Instead, DOGE is working with funds that have already been saved from government inefficiencies, contract cancellations, and agency cuts. This means that the money is essentially being recycled, rather than injected into the economy in the form of new debt. The impact on inflation could still be present, but it would be minimal compared to what we saw in 2020 and 2021. Since fewer people would be receiving the check focused primarily on low-income and fixed-income individuals, the overall amount of money in circulation would be much smaller. This means that we wouldn't see the same dramatic inflationary pressures we experienced in the past. It's also important to note that sending money directly to those who need it most rather than just blanket stimulus payments to everyone would likely have a more positive effect on the economy. People who receive these checks would spend them on essential goods and services, thus stimulating economic activity in targeted areas. This is a far cry from the broad, unfiltered spending spree that occurred a few years ago. The potential for a $5,000 DOGE dividend in addition to the $2,000 stimulus check. We've also heard about the DOGE proposal for a $5,000 dividend. This dividend, aimed at redistributing some of the federal savings directly to the people, has garnered quite a bit of attention. While the idea is intriguing, there are some major challenges and adjustments that could be made to the proposal. For example, while $5,000 would be an incredible amount for many families, the scope of the dividend could be too narrow. If DOGE expands the eligibility requirements to include more people, the amount per person might need to be adjusted downward. However, even if the payout is reduced to $2,000 or $3,000, the broader reach of the program could still have a positive economic impact. This is something that needs to be discussed and refined, but the concept is certainly worth exploring further. Who's paying for all of this? It's important to remember where this money is coming from. Ultimately, the funds for these initiatives are taxpayer dollars. All of us, as taxpayers, are contributing to this pool of savings, and it's only fair that those who have contributed, especially low-income and fixed-income individuals, see some of those funds come back to them. In a sense, the federal government is working to right the wrongs of past inefficiencies, and DOGE is the mechanism through which that money is being repurposed. While we may not agree with every decision being made in Washington, it's clear that the intention here is to redistribute funds in a way that helps those who need it most. And for many Americans, especially those struggling with fixed incomes, this could be a much-needed lifeline. As we continue to track DOGE's efforts and the potential for a $2,000 stimulus check, the future looks uncertain but promising. With savings accumulating rapidly, the possibility of direct payments to the people who need them most is very much on the table. It's an exciting time, and the developments over the coming months will be critical in determining how these funds are distributed. At SSA Español TV, we're committed to keeping you informed every step of the way. Whether it's about government programs, economic changes, or financial tips, we're here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape. Be sure to stay tuned for more updates on this evolving story. Thank you for watching today's video. If you found this information useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And, as always, we're here for you, keeping you updated with the latest news and insights. Until next time, take care, and I look forward to seeing you again in our next video.